America, who are you? Well, that's the title of a book we're going to be talking about today. In recent years, there's been a lot of research, people wanting to know their ancestry. They want to know where they came from. They look into their genealogies and try to trace their heritage back through the centuries. Entire websites today are devoted to just that very subject. Entire businesses are built around finding information about who you are and where you came from. In this book, the author that we're going to be talking about today on this program has done a lot of that research for America, talking about its roots, its heritage, where we came from, its genealogy, and where the foundations of this great nation were established. We're going to talk about that today when we discuss America, Who Are You? Time to Lift Your Prophetic Veil with author Stephen J Spykerman. Stay tuned and we'll be back right after this.
In the search for truth and biblical understanding, God's unchanging Word offers unique insights into the issues of our day, covering news here in America, to news in the Middle East and around the world, events happening today that will fulfill Bible prophecies tomorrow, expounding topics from evolution to the very existence of God, from tragedy to inspiring messages of hope and understanding, all in the light of the unchanging Word of God. Stay tuned as God's unchanging Word takes you on a Bible-based exploration of the major issues that shape your life, the lives of your family, and those around you.
Greetings and welcome to God's Unchanging Word. We have a really special program today with a special guest, Mr. Stephen Spykerman, who has come all the way from England, who's going to tell you a tale.
Well, thank you very much, Tom. I'm very pleased to be here.
Let me share our viewers how I actually got to meet Stephen. It was very interesting. As a few months back, we had Timothy Ballard on our program, and he was talking about the covenant with America and who we are. And I had ordered some books through his publisher, Boyd Tuttle with Legends Library. And in the box, when it came in, there was a little note. And in that note, Boyd had typed, it was a very encouraging message. And he says, kind of like, by the way, God's word is confirmed by two witnesses. As if you want to know who the second witness is, confirming who America is, you need to send for Stephen Spykerman. And so that piqued my interest, and I said, well, how do I get in touch with Stephen Spykerman? And so eventually, through a series of communications, some prayers, and some information, we were able to bring you to New Orleans to do this program. And it's been waiting for several months. So now let me introduce you just briefly. Let me give you a little background. Stephen and my background came out of the church way back in the 1970s. So we have our same heritage, the same roots, so to speak. And Stephen is written many books, at least 7. And when I talked to him, I think he's probably got another one out by this time. A very prolific writer, a Messianic Jew. He has spent a good bit of time in the outskirts and around Jerusalem. And he hails from England. And he is here now following, this is his final stop on a tour through Canada and through North America, and will be heading back when he leaves here this weekend. So thank you for coming. Stephen, tell us a little bit about you and your background, and we're going to ask you a few questions about that. And then we want to get into your book in just a few minutes. So
okay.
Tell us a little bit.
Okay, Tom. Well, you know, I first came into the knowledge of the truth, including, of course, the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath, and the holy days, and, of course, the food laws and so forth from the Bible through the Worldwide Church of God. And of course, I became a member. I was baptized in 1970 after 2.5 years of studying the Bible course. And ever since then, I've been a member of the church, the Worldwide Church of God, for 25 years. I was ordained a deacon in the Brighton Church in England. And that was basically the grounding that I received.
So how did you get your interest into the background, because you were into the historical roots, the Hebrew roots, the foundation, all the way back into the Old Testament, which brings us to today, and actually ties in today to our past. So how did your interest first get into all of
Well,
that?
what did it for me, even before I joined the church, the Worldwide Church of God, was Mr. Armstrong's book, Great Britain, or American Great Britain in Prophecy. And when I saw there in that book that the American people and the British people, the Anglo-Saxon peoples, English-speaking peoples, are indeed descended from the tribes of Israel, and in particular, in this case, they are the descendants of Joseph, the patriarch Joseph. And that so hit my fire, you know, that so completely enthused me. I got that information. I was sitting on the bed and I was reading it to my wife, and I'm not sure she was following it at the time, but boy, oh boy, was excited about it. And for me, that was the reason why I should start keeping the Sabbath, and indeed the holy days, and whatever the Holy One of Israel, our Father in heaven, has decreed, and all his commandments, etc. And so that set me on the road, and I've been on that road ever since.
So you set on this road. Did you set on the road before you actually went down to Jerusalem? Or?
Oh yes, I mean this happened in 1970. I didn't go to Jerusalem until 98, and it seems that at the time I wasn't a member of the Worldwide Church of God, but at the time Father opened doors for me, right, left, and center, and even gave me an entree into the Orthodox communities, and I met some very, very senior rabbis, and I was able to teach them stuff, actually, and I found that a number of them were kindred spirits, and that they were on the same trajectory, and which is astonishing, and no one at the time really appreciated that they are also looking at this. And in fact, in their Siddur, their prayer book, they pray every day for the return of the lost house of Israel, for the return of the 10 tribes, and for the restoration of the whole house of Israel.
Wow, wow, that's pretty amazing how the paths have crossed, and we're back and forth from two viewpoints,
Yeah,
with the same heritage.
the same
Right.
heritage.
So if we could, for a second, I want to bring something up to introduce the book in just a moment. So if we can bring the slide up on the screen for the viewers. This is the title of the book, Who Are You, America?
Yeah.
Time to Lift Your Prophetic Veil. So before I get into the book, what I think we need to do, and we'll go to break in just a second, what we need to do is you need to give us a little background of who Israel is, their breakup, and as far as what I'm understanding from you, is that there was a house of Israel that got divided. And because of that, is put a veil over who Israel actually is today, and a misunderstanding of a modern-day Israel versus an ancient Israel.
Yeah.
So can you bring us up to date on that, and maybe a scriptural background that we might be able to go to?
Yeah, yeah. Do you want me to do that now?
Yeah, we do that now
Okay.
before we go to break. And then
Well, of course, Israel was a nation of 12 tribes. We know that Jacob had 12 sons. Those 12 sons, they grew into 12 tribes. They became a cohesive nation when they exited from Egypt and went through the wilderness. The story is very familiar. It's all in the scriptures. And then, of course, they were ruled by judges, and then they asked for a king, and they had King Saul, they had King David, and they had King Solomon. And they were kings over the United Kingdom of Israel. That kingdom was composed of the 12 tribes. It was one nation. But then after Solomon, it was King Rehoboam, his young son. He was 25 years old, and he took over the throne of David. And it's during his reign, he was planning to increase taxation. The whole nation was groaning under the taxation of King Solomon. And so there was a delegation from the 10 tribes who lived to the north of Jerusalem under the leadership of a prince, Jeroboam. And he begged the king not to increase taxation, but rather to reduce it, because the burden was already too heavy. So
sounds familiar.
yeah, well, nothing changes really, and so history repeats itself. And so what happened was that King Rehoboam said, I'll consider your request, give me 3 days, and come back to me and I'll give you my answer. So that seemed fair enough. So Jeroboam went away with his leadership and came back 3 days later. The king, in the meantime, had consulted with the wise men of Solomon's kingdom, his father, and they all said, look, you have to listen, because if you don't, there's going to be major problems, okay? So that was a wise counsel from the wise counselors. Then he checked with all his schoolmates, you know, the youngsters, the young steeds of Israel, and he said, they said, you're the king, you're the boss, don't take any notice of them, you make that decision. And we need the money anyway, so go for it. You tell him, you're the boss. And so he listened to his young compatriots, and the result was that, of course, when Jeroboam and his leaders came back, he said, my father scourged you with whips. I'm going to scourge you with scorpions. I'm going to increase taxation. And then the leaders of the 10 tribes and Jeroboam said, okay, that's enough. We have enough of the house of David. We're off. We're going to do our own thing. Goodbye, we're off. We're going to set up our own kingdom. And that then was established to the north of Jerusalem. It was the 10 tribes. Their capital was Samaria. And they lived in the territory of Ephraim and Manasseh. Every tribe had its own tribal territory. And they really became the major part of the nation. So that's what happened.
All right, so from that time on, we're looking at 2 houses.
Yeah.
One became the house of Judah,
Yeah.
which composed of the tribe of Judah itself,
Yeah.
the Levitical priesthood, the tribe
Yeah.
of Levi,
Yeah.
and Benjamin.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then the other 10 tribes. Now, from that time on, what happened?
But Jeroboam was going to, he marshaled an army, mainly from the tribe of Benjamin, a massive army, 180,000 crack troops, trained in the military. And so he was about to go to the northern kingdom and show them who was boss. In the meantime, a prophet of God came to him, and he told him these very words. If he spoke to King Rehoboam, and he said, thus says the Lord, you shall not go up to fight against your brethren, the children of Israel. Let every man return to his house, for this thing is from me. In other words, it was God's plan that Judah be one kingdom and that Israel be another kingdom. The division was his plan. It was according to his purpose.
Okay, so now, that's the setting, what we have now. That's the background of where we're at. And so here's what we've got. The nations of Israel, by God's divine providence, separates the northern 10 tribes, and I'll break a history short here. The northern 10 tribes was taken into captivity, and to this day have never been found, basically. They're lost, and in fact you will find many books written called The Lost 10 Tribes of Israel. And the only heritage that was remained that people knew of was the tribe of Judah, which is in existence today in the Middle East, which is known as Israel instead of the Judah, the southern tribes. And hence we have the background for your book. All right, so this is the book that you have written. That's the background. And what we have here, if I can pull this up, I'm going to pull it up on the screen, and I'm going to ask if we can get our camera crew to bring it up on the screen. There we go, we got it. This is the book, in case you can't see it here, Who Are You, America, by Stephen Spykerman. And what we're going to do when we come back from commercial is he's going to tell you where those tribes are today in our heritage. So stay tuned, and we'll be back right after this.
Mr. Vice President, Mr. Speaker, members of the Senate, of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled. For all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened.
Welcome back. All right, we're here in our studio, God's Unchanging Word, with Stephen Spykerman talking about his book, Who Are You, America? So now, what I want to do, Stephen, in this segment here, I want to talk about America, and I want you, if you would, give us some scriptural background into, you read about the nation being broken up, and so in your book, you make a statement. In fact, if I can read this out of your book about who America really is. I'm on page 15, and I'm going to read this. It says, the identical promises were given to Abraham's wife Sarah in Genesis 17:16. It says, I will bless her, and I will also give you a son by her, and then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations, and kings and peoples shall come from her. All right, so in your book, you write that the name of Israel is placed on Joseph's sons.
Yes.
So I know we got a big jump here. So in this segment, if we can take from the blessings of kings and nations, the name itself being placed upon Joseph's sons, and how that connects to America. That's a lot to cover. In
I know.
Can we do that?
In the first place, the prophecy in Genesis about Sarah, the wife of Abraham, is astounding because it contradicts all accepted knowledge. Because most people in the world today believe that the Jewish people are the only descendants of Israel. And of course, they don't consider what the Bible says, that Israel is now two nations. One is called Judah, the Jews, and the other one is called Israel. And that change in name happened after the 10 tribes of Israel separated themselves from the house of David and from Judah. So when you go to Genesis 48, you will see there in Genesis 48 that the name Israel was placed upon the sons of Joseph. And we have verse 16 of Genesis 48, which says the following, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil. Now, isn't that an amazing statement? The angel who has redeemed me from all evil. I think Jacob is actually talking about the Messiah, Jesus Christ.
That's what we understand.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And bless the lads.
The one who became Jesus Christ. A lot of people don't realize is that the God of the Old Testament is the one who became Jesus Christ.
Yes, indeed. And so he says, bless the lads, and let my name, Israel, be named upon them, and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. And so here, the name Israel was transferred onto the nation of the 10 tribes to the north of Judah. And so Judah bears the name Judah, and they're known as the Jewish people today, and then the other tribes bear the name Israel, but specifically on the two sons of Joseph, who are the leaders of the northern kingdom of Israel. Okay? And Joseph had two sons. One was called Manasseh, and the other one was called Ephraim. And what Jacob did, when he blessed the two sons of Joseph, he crossed his arms, and it was really against Joseph's will, because Joseph wanted his oldest son, Manasseh, to have the primary birthright blessing. But Jacob did this, and he said, not so, Father. And he said to his son Joseph, no, I know what I'm doing. And so he blessed Ephraim above Manasseh. So Ephraim got the primary birthright, and Manasseh got the secondary birthright. Now, from a prophetic point of view, this is very, very important. And we will see the fulfillment of that in later on. And then when Jacob blesses his 12 sons, he calls them to his deathbed. He is dying, and he is calling his 12 sons. And he says the following here. He says, and Jacob called his sons and said, gather together, that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. He then gives prophetic blessings over all of his 12 sons, and these blessings apply to the last days. An important thing to remember. So the fulfillment of these blessings is going to become visible in our time. And our time, the last days, probably started about 300 years ago. And what do you see 300 years ago? You see Ephraim, the British Empire, which we scholars in this matter identify as Ephraim. It is ruled, Ephraim is the ruling tribe of the British Commonwealth. And you see this little nation, this little island nation, becoming the most powerful nation on the face of the earth. And all her possessions virtually fall into her lap. She doesn't have to do much conquering to get them. They simply fall into her lap. She gets the greatest navy on the face of the earth. She rules the 7 seas, and it goes on for 150, nearly 200 years. Okay?
Now you cover that in the book. So
Yes.
somebody wrote to get this book.
Yeah.
In fact, what I'll tell you what's very interesting is when I was reading about the book itself, it's a small book. And they said it's a small book with a big punch. And so when you get the book, it really is, it's got a lot of information in a small amount of pages. So
Yeah.
you've done a great job on that. So I interrupted you, so go ahead.
Well, the interesting thing is that when you read the blessings of Jacob over his sons, the tribes have taken the words of their ancestral patriarchal father and applied those words into emblems and symbols reflecting their tribe. Okay? Now, a very obvious example is where you look at his blessing over Judah. And he says in Judah, Judah in verse 9 is a lion's whelp. What that means, it's a very young lion. And prophetically, it means Judah is a very young nation. So in an end-time context, the state of Israel, Judah, was founded in 1948. And that's a very, very young nation. Britain goes back 2,000 years. America is 250 years old. Judah is only since 1948, so a very young lion's whelp. And then he goes on to say, from the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion who shall rouse him? Then he says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the people. Shiloh is a reference to the King Messiah who is to come to establish his glorious millennial 1,000-year reign here upon the earth. And he will be taking the throne of David, and it is his right to sit on that throne. Okay? All of this is in that one scripture. So Judah, the Jewish people, have adopted the lion as their symbol. And when you look at the heraldry of Judah, it often has 3 lions, the triple lions of Judah.
Oh, that's quite interesting. That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so now, all right, that covers the southern tribe. All right,
Yeah.
So can you give us a connection with some of the prophecies about Israel in tying in Britain and America in some of these prophecies? I want to say something here because you just brought out something just a minute ago, and I don't know if our audience caught this or not. Is that when he said, and I know it was pretty clear the way he said it, that these would befall the people at the end time. So here's something you have to consider when you think that Israel doesn't exist with those tribes, is that those tribes and their prophecies have to exist at the time of Christ for the prophecies to be true, or the book's a lie.
Yeah.
And you can't trust it. In the book of Revelation, when you look at the 144,000,
Yeah.
reinforces what the end time is that those tribes are in existence before the return of Christ.
Absolutely.
Because there's 12,000 from each of the tribes of Israel.
That's it.
So for someone to deny that those tribes are in existence today is to deny the prophecies left for John by Christ. And the prophecies in the book of Genesis that the end time, they would be in effect at that particular time. So can you bring us into, if you can, in a brief, we've got a few minutes here.
Okay.
Yes, talk about America, talk about Britain. And
Jesus Christ himself said, when he gave the reason why his Father had sent him down to this earth. And he said the following, which is quoted in Matthew 15, verse 24. And he answered and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So
how could that be if they're not around?
right. Jesus Christ himself said, that's why I have been sent. That's why my Father sent me. I have been sent. I was not sent except to the lost tribes, the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He's the shepherd. They are the lost sheep. And the reason they're lost is because they walked away from the covenant which the Holy One of Israel, the Father, God the Father, made at Mount Sinai and gave them their conditions, his conditions of his covenant, and then all the tribes of Israel, all 12 tribes of Israel said, everything the Lord has said, we will do. And they said it not once, they said it 3 times, and, for emphasis. And so they bound not only themselves, but there's about 3.5 million Israelites standing there at the foot of Mount Sinai, and they said, everything the Lord has said, we will do. They bound all their descendants at the same time. So if you're a descendant of the tribes of Israel, if you're a descendant, then it is incumbent upon you to honor that covenant. Now what the 10 tribes did, they walked away from that covenant. And they said, we'll have nothing to do with it. And they went and did their own thing. And of course they went into idolatry, they went into witchcraft, they went into the occult, to the point where they're even sacrificing their own children on the altar of Moloch, etc. And so the result was that God sent many prophets to them to warn them, ask them to change their ways, turn around and repent. They weren't listening. And so what happened? The Assyrian people, most warlike people, invaded the northern kingdom of Israel. Not once, 3 times. And they took whatever population there was, they took it away to Assyria, 1,600 miles away, where they became captives.
Well, here's an interesting parallel. When a person begins to understand their heritage, who they are and where their background, and begin to understand who the nations of Israel are today, the duality of warning, where God says, if you do what I say, you'll be blessed, and if you don't, then you will be cursed, is that just like in similar fashion with ancient Israel, who are warned for nearly 100 years, and through 3 successive waves of captivity, never repented. The United States, in similar fashion, we're watching it go through the same degeneration as ancient Israel did as a modern nation. And we're beginning to see those same patterns beginning to affect our nation. So is there anything else you want to cover in this before we actually go to the break and go to the next segment?
Yeah, just this scripture in Genesis 35, which will answer your original question, where it says in verse 10 through to verse 12, and God said to him, your name is Jacob. Your name shall not be called Jacob anymore, but Israel shall be your name. So he called his name Israel. Also God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you, and kings shall come from your body. Okay? And so there we have a prophecy that a nation and a company of nations shall come from you. Some people have interpreted company of nations to be commonwealth of nations. And of course, what happens some 300-400 years ago, you see this great British Commonwealth of nations coming to the fore. Out of nowhere, they arise. And they become the rulers of the world. and they become the policemen of the world. And they establish over 90 nations around the world. They get to actually be in possession of 1/4 of the Earth's landmass, and they get to be in charge over 1/4 of the world's population. There's never been an empire before or since who has had that extraordinary record of achievement. And then what happens? Britain rules the waves and carries on civilizing nations, bringing Christianity to nations, bringing the scriptures and the Bible to nations, with the help of the United States of America and some of the continental nations. The work was mainly done by the English-speaking peoples, and they translated the Bible into 6,000 languages, and that process is still going on. And that's the work of Joseph. Joseph is a benefactor. Joseph, his name means prosperity. And the British, with the Industrial Revolution, and then the Americans following on, brought untold prosperity to the world. The world's never been this prosperous. And then, there you have evidence of who Joseph is and where you find Joseph today amongst the English-speaking peoples.
It's absolutely true. And there's never been a nation. I mean, if you look back through the history of recorded mankind, there's never been a time where there's been more blessings fallen upon any country or any nation as has fallen upon Great Britain and the United States. Now, I encourage you to write, to look into your heritage, because if you don't know who you are, you don't know where you're going. But if you know who you are, then you can look ahead to see what God has to say about that. So now that was a big session, and I know there's a lot to cover, and that's not even the cream of the top of we've got to be going into it.
Yeah.
But we need to move on. So now we're going to go into another break here. We're going to take a commercial in just a second. And I'm going to pull up, just if you can get this pulled up to our screen one more time on this one, is we're going to talk about the Great Seal of America. And we're going to go into that Great Seal of America, and there's actually 2 seals. It's in the book, and we're going to go through some of that in our next segment. So stay tuned, and we'll be back right after this break.
A rare phenomena is about to take place. It is called the blood moon tetrads. What does it mean? Extraordinary celestial events are to occur precisely on God's high holy days. The blood moon tetrads have only appeared on these holy days 7 times in the past 2,000 years. During each of these 7 periods, major events have jolted and reshaped world history. Will this 8th tetrad be the ultimate harbinger of the heavens? Will it alter history again, as some are claiming? Are these the blood moons foretold in Scripture? Many are predicting it could be the time of the rapture, or Armageddon, and some are even hinting it may be the prophesied return of the Messiah. Monumental, life-altering events are rapidly shaping up around the globe, pointing to a perfect storm. But what do they mean? You need to know. Separate the facts from fiction, the real history from hype, and see what the Bible has to say. For decades, Tom Carey has devoted his ministry to delivering vital messages on this and other end-time prophecies. With his command of the unchanging Word of God, Carey has waded through the mire of conflicting arguments, separating the wheat from the chaff, giving sound reason and steady wisdom in a world of phony hype and sensationalism. Don't be caught up in confusion like so many others. Learn what the Bible and history actually says about the blood moon tetrads, the perfect storm. Get the new book and the DVD available now.
Welcome back. We are in the studios of God's Unchanging Word with our guest today, Stephen Spykerman, who's come all the way from England. And we're talking about his book, Who Are You, America? And we've been through some foundation. We've talked a little bit about the history of Israel, the breakup of the two nations, and how they actually brought us to where we are today. In the book, Stephen has taken the time to actually put together a couple of charts, graphs, so to speak, almost like a roadmap that talks about America's Great Seal and the Presidential Seal. And in those seals, he brings together a tie-in to ancient Israel. And what we want to do in this segment is as much as we can cover in this segment. Stephen, I'd like for you to be able to go through a little bit about that. And we may need to go back and forth. We'll get our studio camera here to go back and forth as you're talking about some of this, and you can bring it up, and so the people at home can see a little bit about this seal. So tell us a little bit about this. First of all, tell us, how did you come up with this idea to begin with?
Well, the thing is that it is Genesis 49 and Jacob's words to the tribes, as I've already mentioned earlier, that those tribal emblems were taken as symbols of the individual tribes. And actually, once you have the understanding of not only the words of Jacob before he died, and they were prophetic words for our time, but also the words of Moses. Just before Moses died, he also addressed the 12 tribes of Israel, and he gave additional characteristics. And so not only he gave them symbols which reflected them, but he also gave some idea about what character they would have, character traits. And so when you actually combine the symbolic words that were spoken with the character traits that Jacob addressed and that Moses addressed, and you lay them together, then you get a complete picture of each tribe. And that if you understand what the tribal symbols have become, you can actually follow the progress of the tribes from the lands of captivity where they ended up below the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea, etc., and where they were basically captives, but then they were released because the Persians attacked Assyria, and also the tribes themselves rebelled, and with the Persians and the tribal rebellion, they were able to defeat Assyria and destroy their city of Nineveh. And so they then fled across the Caucasus Mountains. And in the Caucasus Mountains, the path they took is still today known as the path of the Israelites. And also the word Caucasian comes from the fact that it describes the Israelites who came across the Caucasus Pass, and they became known as Caucasians ever since, although they went under many different names. And so that's really where the idea comes from, that the symbols of nations will reflect where they're from.
All right, let's pull this up on the screen. I don't know exactly how we're going to do this, but if bring it up, and while we have it up there, can you see this from where you are over there?
Yes, I can see. I can just about see it.
So this is the Great Seal, and so it says this: the cloud of glory is the representation of the pillar of fire, pillar of cloud that hovered above the tabernacle in the camp of Israel.
Yeah.
All right, so what you've done here in this Great Seal of America, tell us about what are we doing?
Well, the cloud and the stars above the head of the eagle are extremely significant, because the purpose of heraldry, which is the art of symbols, is to identify. So this is America's identity badge. You could even call this Great Seal America's birthmark. It reflects America's origins, okay? Now you see the pillar of cloud, these clouds around the stars in the middle.
That's up the top at the middle.
Okay. At the top, above the eagle's head. That circle of clouds represents...
Oh, okay, I'm going to use my mouse. Is that coming across on the screen?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay,
So
all right, so right up in here.
Circle of clouds represents the pillar of clouds. Okay. Inside there, you have the pillar of fire.
All right, the pillar of fire.
And then inside that, you have 13 stars in the shape, just follow it, in the shape of the Star of David. Can you see that? That constellation of 13 stars is in the shape of the Star of David. Now ask yourself, why does America have a representation in her Great Seal that is pointing back to ancient Israel and the Israelites coming out of Egypt in the great Exodus, and then they're being led by a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud, and a supreme Israelite symbol is, of course, the Star of David, okay? So why is that in America's heraldry so prominently displayed if it doesn't have any meaning? But we can go much further than this, because you see the motto, E pluribus unum,
All right, so here we go.
which is
All right.
explained on the left there,
Here.
which is many people, or it says...
One nation for many
One
people.
nation for many people, okay?
Right.
Which is really the story of America, isn't it?
That's true, yeah.
And then you have the constellation of 13 stars, also significant, because America started with 13 colonies, 13 English colonies. And that is a significant number in American heraldry. You will find the number 13 in all of America's heraldry, and there's a reason for it, a very significant reason for it. For instance, if you look at the olive branch on the left, you will see that the olive branch has got 13 leaves and 13 olives. And then in the left talon, the eagle carries 13 arrows. And when you look at the breast of the eagle, you see 13 stripes in the breast of the eagle.
Right, we got going across 13 stripes, yeah.
Yeah, and so forth. So the number 13 is stamped all over American heraldry. And of course, there is a reason for that, because Manasseh is the ruling tribe, son of Joseph, was the older son of Joseph. He should have inherited the primary birthright, but his number in the pecking order of Jacob's sons is number 13, because Joseph's place was 11, Benjamin's place was 12, Ephraim was raised above Manasseh, so Ephraim gets Joseph's place at number 11, and that means that Manasseh has to be number 13. Okay? So the number 13 describes Manasseh, which is the ruling tribe of America, and as the heraldry identifies. Now, there's something else about number 13, in that it is a sacred number. Now, most hotels won't have a 13th floor, and most hotels don't have a number 13 bedroom in their building. People are very superstitious about number 13, but that doesn't really come from God, because the number 13 is a holy and sacred number. And the actual meaning of number 13 is echad in Hebrew, which means unity and oneness. It means oneness. The Hebrew people, the Jewish people, have a prayer which says God is one. You know, He is echad, He is one.
So tell us that again. Number 13, the Hebrew word for it is what?
Echad.
Echad, which means one?
One. It means oneness or unity or just one. It also means ahava, which means love. We know God is love, and He's also one. Okay? And so this is all encapsulated in the number 13, because in the Hebrew alphabet, the alphabet is not just letters. Every letter has a number. They don't have a separate system of numbers. So when you read Hebrew, you can actually read the Hebrew text literally, what it says, but you can also look at the numbers, what they say. You can find out what the numbers say. Each letter has a number. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. When you put the letters of a Hebrew word together, you get a completely different meaning from what the word actually says. So there is a subtext in all of the Hebrew literature. And so when you look at the number 13, it means echad, it means love. And then when you see there the eagle has got the olive branch, which is a symbol of Israel, by the way. The olive tree is a symbol of Israel. It also means peace. And there he's got the arrows. The eagle has the arrows in the other talon. And when you add the symbolic evidence of the olive branch to the symbolic evidence of the arrows, you add them together. 13 plus 13 is 26. And 26 means Yod He Vav He. It is the unutterable, ineffable name of God in Hebrew. Okay?
That's what the number accounts to.
Yeah, number 26. So number 26 actually gives God's name. And number 13 says God is one and he is love. Isn't that amazing? Now, that's all in American heraldry, and it all comes from Israel. And this seal is shouting at the world, if the world would only take notice, and it's shouting at the American populations, if they would only take notice, I am Israel, it's saying. I am an Israel nation. I am a Hebrew nation.
Actually, when you look at history, many of the founders of this nation, they knew and they believed this.
They designed it.
They designed it, yeah.
They designed it, and many of them are Hebrew speakers, and so forth. And there was even a discussion as to whether America, in its foundation, should adopt Hebrew as its language rather than English. There was a rather strong...
Wouldn't that be interesting?
there was rather a strong anti-English feeling about at the time, as they were fighting England and the King of England for their independence and their freedom. So, you know, there was a big discussion, and the decision was only made by just a few votes.
Wow.
So there you are.
All right, so now, there's a lot more here. So when you get the book, go through this and isolate each little segment, and you're going to find there's a history here that's going to keep you mesmerized to where it comes from and the connections of our colonies with ancient Israel. All right, so now I'm going to go to the next seal.
Yeah.
This is the presidential seal. So now if we can bring that up on the screen, and let's just go through that briefly like you did just now with the other seal. All right, and I'm going to try to follow with the cursor like I did last time.
Yeah. Now, this is just utterly astounding, because you find in the presidential seal, which you see on television virtually every day when the president has something to say, and it's been there hidden in plain sight, because above the eagle again there is a symbol which pretty well no one can explain, but it's all about Israel, and it's actually about Joseph. And Joseph's dream is in the presidential seal. Isn't that extraordinary? And if you can read for me, Tom, the bottom line, below Joseph.
Down the bottom.
Can you read that text?
It says, "Look, I have dreamed another dream, and this time the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars bowed down to me." And so he told it to his father and his brothers, and this was from Genesis 37, 9 and 10. So Jacob answered, says, what is this dream you have dreamed? Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come and to bow down to the earth before you? Genesis 37, 10.
That's right, you see. So it is Jacob who interprets his son's dream. Jacob gives the interpretation. Shall your mother and I and your brothers indeed come to bow down to the earth before you? Now, have a look at the presidential seal. What you see, the rays of the sun. You see the rays of the sun above the head of the eagle?
Going all across here.
Yeah, that represents Jacob. And then you see 13 phases of the moon. They represent Rachel, Joseph's mother, okay?
All right, so I got the
and then you got 13 stars, which represent the 13 tribes of Israel, including Ephraim and Manasseh, who were raised to full tribal status by Jacob.
Which incidentally, we had 13 colonies.
And you had 13
Kind of
colonies.
coincidental.
And you've got, not only that, but you also got the 13th Amendment. And, there are just so many 13s. Once you start looking in American...
Well, you can imagine why Satan, the arch enemy of God, would want to use 13 as an evil number.
Yes.
Because he doesn't want you to connect to God.
No, absolutely.
All right, so what else we got?
So the rest is basically similar of the Great Seal. You know, you've got the olive branch, you've got the arrows, you have 13 olives and 13 leaves, you've got 13 arrows, you've got 13 stripes in the eagle's shield, and but the only other difference here is that you got 50 stars representing the 50 states of the United States. But the number 50 is also very significant in biblical terms.
Absolutely.
And in Israel terms, because the number 50 indicates the Jubilee. The 50th year is the year of the Jubilee, when all the captives are set free and when all debts are forgiven, and it really represents Jesus Christ, because he is the Jubilee. When he comes, I mean, that's the ultimate fulfillment of the Jubilee ordination. once every 50th year, all debts are forgiven, and all captives are released, and so forth. Now, Jesus Christ is going to do that when he returns to the earth to establish his kingdom. And do you know what he's going to do? He's going to bring the two nations, the northern kingdom of Israel, the 10 tribes, and the nation of Judah. He's going to bring them together into one nation. That's why he's coming, to establish his kingdom. And his kingdom is Israel, right? And so he's going to restore the nation like it was in the days of King David and the days of King Solomon. Because Jesus Christ is not a lesser king than King David. King David ruled over 12 tribes. He's not a lesser king than King Solomon. King Solomon ruled over 12 tribes. So he is going to gather the tribes and reestablish that nation, which has been split apart now for 3,000 years, near enough.
Well, appreciate Steve. We're gonna take one more break, and when we come back, we're gonna wrap it up, and we'll let Stephen tell us where you can get the book and get more information about it, and anything else that he wants to talk about. So you stay tuned, and we'll be right back to God's Unchanging Word right after this break. Welcome back. We're at the final session for God's Unchanging Word with Stephen Spykerman, author of Who Are You, America? And so in this segment here, we want to use as a wrap-up. We want to talk, let Stephen talk about what's on his mind, anything specific he'd like to bring up. And then we got I've got an interesting close for you before we actually close today. So, Stephen, I'm going to turn this over to you now, and I guess put you on the spot. Tell you, what would you like to talk about?
Well, I'd like to say, first of all, and give you the Hebrew name of America. And in Hebrew, present-day Hebrew, America is known as Arsot Habrit, which means the lands of the covenant.
Asat Abrit.
Arsot Habrit.
Asat Abrit.
Okay. Brit means covenant in Hebrew. And if you look at British, for instance, Brit means covenant, and Ish means man. So the word British means covenant man. And the word Britain is Brit Am, which is the people of the covenant. And so the same names apply to Great Britain as apply to the United States of America. And that's not a coincidence. This is by God's design. And also, G.I. Joe. G.I. means government issue, and Joe means Joseph. And even the name Yank comes from Jacob, is derived from Jacob. When you look at the origin of the word Yank, it actually comes from Jacob. So there are just so many indicators that America is descended from Israel. And whereas Great Britain is ruled by Ephraim, that's Canada, that's New Zealand, that's Australia, the Commonwealth, and America is ruled by Manasseh. It doesn't mean to say that all Americans are from the tribe of Manasseh. It simply means that all the tribes are here. All the tribes of Israel are here, but Manasseh is the ruling tribe. And in Britain it's the same. All the tribes are there, and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, but Ephraim is the ruling tribe. And they came to power before America because Ephraim received the birthright above his older brother. He was raised above Manasseh, and that's why he came to prominence in the world before the United States of America. And then after the Second World War, when Britain had to fight that war on her own for the first few years, and then Manasseh, that is America, came to assist her, and the result is that they won the great victory against the Nazi Empire and the Japanese Empire, etc. And after that, Britain was basically exhausted, not only physically exhausted in sort of mental exhaustion, but also financially exhausted. They'd spent their last penny, and they couldn't keep up their empire. Not only that, they didn't behave very well towards the establishment of the State of Israel. God used them to help establish the State of Israel, but then during the war, they behaved abominably in refusing the refugees from the concentration camps of Germany to enter into the new country of Israel. And so, as a result of that, Britain lost the entire Indian subcontinent. They lost India, they lost Pakistan, they lost Bangladesh, they lost Nepal, they lost all the nations in that region which they were in charge of and had been in charge of for several hundred years. So God withdrew his hand of blessing from Britain when Britain turned against his people from the house of Judah. And the same thing is happening with America today. When America is turning against the State of Israel, you will find more and more that the blessings will be removed from America, and America will come under judgment.
And actually, that's prophetic, because God says that if you bless Israel, he will bless you.
Yeah.
And then if you curse Israel, then you will be cursed. And people do not realize, because it is God's people, all of God's people,
Yes.
is that when you take that away, then you're paying a price for that.
Yeah.
And right now, we're beginning to feel the pain of our actions because of the withdrawal of this binding love between the peoples of Israel and America and Britain today.
Yeah.
And we're moving into a point.
We are brothers. This is the point. We are all brothers. And when we're starting to treat our own brothers in an abominable way, in a despicable way, well then, Father above is not very pleased. And so judgment is coming, and it's visible because it's a long time since America won a war. I can't remember when they last won a war. And also, I mean, you can't say Afghanistan was a victory. You can't really say that Iraq was a victory, etc. And you can go back further. You can't really say Korea was a victory, and so forth. So,
Or Vietnam.
or Vietnam. I mean, definitely not a victory. And if you look at the fact that 9/11 was, God permitted 9/11 to occur, well, that was an act of judgment. And it was a shot across the bows of America. And basically, that was only possible because God had removed his hand of protection over the United States of America. It had been there for centuries, and now Fortress America was breached through the 9/11 situation, and God's blessing clearly wasn't on that situation, and his blessing and protection was removed. So America now stands naked. She may have the mightiest navy and the mightiest air force and the mightiest armies, but she's lost confidence in the power that she has and is not really prepared anymore to use it. And the world knows it. And of course the world hates a vacuum, and others will step in. Now I just want to close with the fact that my vision is to get this book, Who Are You, America?, to get it into Congress. I want every senator, I want every congressman, I want the president, I want his cabinet, I want every governor of every of the 50 states and their legislative assemblies to have a copy of this book. That is my vision. And I did the same in England when I wrote a book called Great Britain and Her Hidden Ancestry. We were able, with God's help, to get it into the House of Lords and into the House of Commons. We get it into the hands of the Queen and the royal family. We got it into the hands of all the bishops, including the Archbishop of the land. So the warning was given. And the reason I based this vision upon the fact that the prophets of Israel didn't go standing on street corners and proclaiming their messages on street corners. No, they went to the palace. They went to the house of the king. They went to the leaders of the nation, and they gave the warning to them. Now, this needs to happen here in America. This book needs to go into the Congress. And if you're prepared to help us do this, well, I certainly appreciate that. And you can work through our wonderful brother, Tom Carey here, and his ministry.
I appreciate it, Stephen. So let me tell you where you can get the book. Primarily through Legends Library. Use legendslibrary.org. You can go to legendslibrary.org and you could order it direct.
Amazon.
Or Amazon. And just go to the internet and you'll find it pretty much everywhere. And there's various ways you can get it. You can get it through the book. You can get it through PowerPoint presentations. He also has that seals and big charts. And if you go there, you'll find these things. And the reason we're doing this today is because I want the vision that Stephen has for the warning message, which is our goal as this ministry of God's unchanging word, which is the outreach for the Church of God and Ministries International, is to be able to be a warning message to an end-time generation. And when we look through the historical record of the past, the warning message, as he said, wasn't just in the byways, although the people need to hear it. It has to reach the leadership. And the goal here is that if we can reach the leadership of this nation, then we can do our part in warning this world before the return of Jesus Christ. And we've done our part. Appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in, Stephen.
Thank you,
for
Tom.
being here. One last point is we will have Stephen back again talking about another one of his books. It is
The Covenant with Death.
The Covenant with Death. The Covenant with Death. So stay tuned. Watch the website for the next program with Covenant with Death with Stephen Spykerman. And thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.